Welcome to the first episode of Trauma to Soul. We're going to delve into the human psyche on our way to self-love, self-validation, and authentic living. The first episode is with my really good friend, Mandy. She is an exceptionally gifted writer. When you look at her Instagram feed, there is an elegant beauty to her words and her images. There's a depth of soul, clarity, and insightfulness that just awakens you. She also has her own column on the Elephant Journal. And the way this all started, this episode, was she had sent me an article she wrote right before it was published about love addiction. And after reading the article, I felt like I was at my first Love Addicts meeting. It was just so well written, so insightful, and kind of shined some light on things that I really didn't want to have to take a look at. So we decided to fire up the microphones and we just started talking. And by the time we looked up, 2.5 hours had passed, and it really felt like 10 minutes. There's an incredibly great flow throughout the whole episode, but because it's so long, we're going to cut it up into 8 shorter segments. We're going to get started with the first one right now, so sit back and enjoy.
I remember being in that very first meeting and not understanding anything about love addiction. I just saw very pretty candles and the ambiance was perfect. And I was like, oh, this is amazing, And then they started with this gut-wrenching, raw, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm fucking up. And for me to actually sit there and listen, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I thought, wow, I've been doing this for 20 years and I had no idea. I think subconsciously you know your pattern and you know what's going through your head. But consciously you're like, no, everything's fine. I'm totally okay. It's a bad dating life, go figure. But it's not. It's that lack of self-love. It's that abandonment feeling. And reading up on it afterwards and realizing that it's not officially diagnosed, I was like, wow, because it should be official. Addiction is addiction.
I agree. It is so subtle, and it's the fairy tales we're told, right?
Thanks, Disney.
Right. So you're supposed to meet somebody, fall in love, live happily ever after. How could that be a bad thing? How could you put the word addiction to something like that?
Exactly.
But it's the undercurrent. So it's where we came from, what was lacking, what we didn't get, that we're trying to fill this hole inside of us. And we have these patterns that we're not aware of. And we've been going about it the same way. And the dialogue is so true on a certain level that we don't even realize it's there, and it's dictating all of our choices. And they're usually very poor choices.
Yes, extremely poor choices.
I'm getting a handle on it is really hard, because so the core of it is addiction. So, it's to take you out of pain and bring you joy and peace and good feelings. Whenever you think about relationships in a good way, there should be nothing negative attaching to it.
Yeah.
But it's how we act as soon as we get that emotional attachment. I'm great when there's no emotional attachment,
Oh, me too. Pros. Yeah, exactly.
But there's a fear that comes with that emotional attachment.
Yeah.
There's a panic that sets in. There's, I'm trying to think of the right word, but there's a jockeying for position. There's, I can't let you know how I'm feeling, because once you know that I feel this way about you, I lose all power.
Exactly. It's the power struggle.
Yes.
When, if you think about it, a healthy relationship is obviously based on communication. So I think what I've struggled with the most intensely is that when I'm in that relationship, and that comes down to the fairy tale mindset, because that comes up so much in the group. It's about, this relationship in my head is perfection. Like, we're made for each other. We're soulmates. And then in real life, you find out that relationships are work and they're hard and they have negative aspects and they have uncomfortable situations. And because you're not equipped to handle that. So if somebody says to you, oh, look, I can't talk right now, I'm busy doing something, your immediate thought is, oh my God, they're leaving me. They don't like me. They hate me.
Right.
Like, you know, and that's completely abnormal. I mean, it's totally fine for someone to say, listen, I'm fucking busy. Like, I'll get back to you.
Right.
And that's that fantasy. And then you have these emotional triggers where you blow up. I know for me, like blowing up is my go-to. I love doing that, you know. Oh, you're such a this and you're such a that and you're not paying enough attention to me. We don't have trust and we don't have this and we don't have that. And then it's that walk of shame. That walk of, I'm really sorry that I said those things and I'm really sorry. And for them to understand it is even harder because they're like, well, where is this coming from? Who is this? I don't know this side of you.
So it's almost like you're holding off these feelings by playing towards the fantasy in your head.
Exactly.
And so there's a connection, right? There's this emotional connection and there's a certain amount of space that's safe. When that amount of space is too much or too little where you feel safe, you get that reaction and you go to blow up.
Yes. And it's not pretty. It's not, it's one of the things, it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because I feel like when we're in a space of anger, it's easier for us to express ourselves more authentically. So we can say things that we wouldn't ordinarily say when we're in the fairy tale, when we're doing things perfectly, you know, because I think as love addicts, that's what we do. We want to project this image of who we are. And the minute somebody sees a crack in that, we don't like it. We don't like to be seen because we spend most of our time hiding. So for me, that anger and that heavy emotion, because like I've said to you before, I don't believe in good and bad emotions. I believe in uncomfortable and comfortable emotions. So when you have an uncomfortable emotion, you have to navigate through it. You can't take it out on other people, preferably.
Right.
You can't dump your uncomfortable emotion on someone else because that's not fair. But it does happen, and I think it starts to erode the relationship that you have, and that other person then becomes resentful because they're now managing your emotion instead of managing their own, which is what they should do.
Right. So it gets to that point where there's a protective layer we have. And the fantasy that we're keeping in our head, it has to be perfect. And if it's off 1 degree in any direction, it breaks the fantasy and it takes us right into fear. So it's basically this thin veneer that we're trying to keep that connection, that fantasy in our heads, but we don't know what to do. We don't know how to manage it when it goes away. We don't know how to self-soothe. It goes to fear and panic, and everybody reacts differently.
But this is the thing. I think the one thing I've taken the most out of it is self-soothing, because I realized that I spent a great deal of my time allowing others to soothe me. And I realized how detrimental that is. So when I do now get to a space where I feel uncomfortable, where I feel angry, where I feel despondent, I try my best to take a step back. I mean, I love meditation, I love yoga, I love all those things. But if you're not doing it in the right mind frame, you don't really get many benefits from it. So I had to then go, okay, if I'm going to the mat today and I'm going to do a yoga practice, what is it that I want to process? What feelings is it going to bring up for me? Then, okay, I've got to just feel this feeling. And then working through it on your own. I mean, my phone is a great example. Like I'm always picking up my phone and, what's this? Take that shit away. Take that shit away. Find a space, whatever it is that you need to do it for you, and don't cling. And I think during COVID, it's been very interesting because the more I've been self-soothing, the more people who don't know how to self-soothe are attracted to me. So I have constant messages from people going, I feel like this and I feel like this. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of emotion. Wow, that's overwhelming. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't reach out for help, because you should. But at the same time, there comes a point where you can have a conversation with someone, or you could share your feelings with someone, and you have to then take responsibility for that emotion. This is me. This is how I'm feeling. And this other person isn't going to make me feel better. I'm going to make me feel better.
Right. So see, that's the thing. When the connection is broken, how do we self-soothe? And you got to go back to childhood, right?
Oh, of course.
For me, I mean, you say you blow up when the connection goes awry. Me, I'm the complete opposite. I freeze. And then I go into this, I go inward, where it's like, well, if I wasn't a worthless piece of shit, this wouldn't have happened.
Exactly.
And that's my default. So then it's harder for me to come back. So I self-soothe, but it could take me 6 weeks. You know what I mean? To feel like I'm worthy enough to have the conversation. I'll go in my head and be like, well, what's my responsibility in this? And because immediately it's 100% my responsibility.
Of course. Yeah.
So what I have to do
all
is
your fault, Joe.
It is. So I have to talk myself out of 100%.
Yeah.
And what I really need to do is, there's no percent to be given anywhere most of the time. It just comes down to lack of communication of where two people had come from. And it's navigating the fantasy versus the reality. See, my fantasy for a relationship maybe look different than yours.
No,
So
of course, yeah.
If I get together with you and I have my fantasy and you have your fantasy, I'm steering the ship towards my fantasy.
Naturally, yeah.
If that makes you uncomfortable, you're going to start steering it the other way, and then I'm in a panic.
Exactly.
Because then you feel like all sense of yourself is gone, because you give too much away, because you're if you've never had that connection when you were a child, and that is the most sought after thing within your soul, when you get an eye drop full, you are just going to run to it like it's this huge river
heroin.
of happiness. And it was just like, no, it was just one drop. Put the brakes on. It's like, but there's something gets triggered in my brain that is euphoric.
Yeah.
And it becomes the focus of everything. Food tastes better. The sun's brighter. The leaves are prettier,
But this is what is so hard about love addiction, because it's not like stopping heroin. So you stop heroin, you change your circle of friends, you take yourself out of that temptation. Okay, this is not something I have to deal with or ever see again unless I choose to do so. But love addiction, we live on love. We thrive in love. So those feelings of euphoria and those feelings of, food tastes better and the sun's brighter and everything's happy, those are good and positive things. Those aren't things that we should dismiss. But then when it becomes or transcends into that all-consuming, what is that person doing? What are they thinking? When are we going to get married and have 2.5 kids and buy a big house? And it's that aspect. So I think in some respects, I mean, I'm not taking away from people who have serious substance abuse problems, but I feel like it's the same with an eating disorder. People have an unhealthy relationship to food, and we need food to live. So,
right.
It's having that space of like, okay, so this is an addiction for me. This is something that I take to the nth degree. But I have to learn how to navigate within that space and know my limits. What am I pushing? What am I not pushing? What am I settling for? What am I not settling for? When you were talking about responsibility, it takes two people in a relationship. It always does. If somebody's got 70% and the other person's got 30% or 40% and 60%, whatever it is, there are two sides to it. Well, actually 3 sides to every story. Yours, mine, and the truth. So that's what you have to keep in your mind. You have to find a way to navigate love, which we need, which sustains us, but at the same time, know when it is consuming you. Because that's not health. It's not healthy.
It's not, but it feels so good.
I'm sure many addicts have said that. It feels so good.
And all addictions end up in failure. It's
Exactly.
How do you get, so, navigating all of that, the self-soothing and not letting it become all consuming. Like it's really hard to stop that train of thoughts because I don't know what it is, the thoughts or the feelings, but they're in a groove and they're just feeding each other. Like, the thought of the person when you go to bed and you start thinking about them and you can see their face and you can hear their voice, this whole thing just starts to get cooking in you. And it's like, I want to show you everything.
Exactly. I want to give you everything. Yeah, exactly.
And you go out of your way to kind of expose yourself, to be vulnerable, to how many people have you really loved in this life? So when it comes along and you get that feeling, you think this is it. And, you just throw all the chips in. I don't know how to hold back. Like that's something like you're saying, that's self-soothing and learning and seeing the patterns. And, if it feels this good and it's not a chemical drug, why should I put the brakes on this? And that's what happens inside of me. It's like, I've been waiting my whole life to feel this way. I don't want to do anything to derail this. And then I get cautious. Like, do you get cautious with your words and your actions because you don't want to say anything to put the other person off? And then you start backtracking. It's like, no, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. I meant it this way. How could you? We shouldn't be living that way. So when we're in that fantasy, it's all consuming, and you're kind of watching yourself and you're watching the relationship, and it takes over because there's so much to lose. If you're feeling that good, there's another side to it. That if this thing goes, falls apart. I may be on the top of this mountain right now, but I am going to be in like muck and rubble and garbage in about 2.3 seconds. And we don't seem to protect that when we're in the fantasy. We're just kind of rolling with it. But you're looking for oneness within yourself. And when you feel like everything is just clicking and life is what it's like, it's the two of you. And the rest of the world can do whatever the hell they want because I am no longer a part of it because I got this going on now, right?
Exactly.
And then you can get lost in that.
I think that's the problem. And I think, so what I've found for myself is being exposed to people who felt the same way was very empowering for me because I'd always believed that there was something wrong with me and I always believed that I was broken. And it was so good to connect with people that felt the same. Like, oh, okay, this person has, this horrific story or whatever. But I think for me, your life as you know it has to be fulfilled on its own before you can. Look, I'm not saying you have to have everything perfect because that's not realistic. But I find that a lot of the relationships that I see or a lot of the relationships I've been in have been based on you are going to save me. You are going to make my life amazing and it's going to be wonderful. And from my side as well. And I had to reach a point where I had to cut myself off from that because I didn't firstly want to be tempted because I know it's so easy to just fall back into the same patterns. But at the same time, I had to find that I was doing what I was spending my time on. I had to navigate and find out, is this making me happy? So I love to write. I love to do yoga. I love to meditate. I love to hike. I live in a beautiful city. All of those things always took a backseat to a relationship. So I didn't have time to write. I love social media. I'm obsessed with it. I didn't have time for social media because I'm invested my time and my energy and everything into this relationship. So as wonderful as it may seem to be in those situations where you're not alone, you're loved, if it's actually real and lasting love. But at the same time, I think a key takeaway for you when you're in that situation is my life on hold while I'm with this other person? Because if it is, that's your cue. Then you know, okay, maybe I'm not ready for this.
Wow. Wow. Wow, that was awesome. I'm going to have to listen to that again because there's a lot to process there. That, yes, there is. Wow, I don't even know where to start. So, yes, your life does put on hold, and you do let other things, friends, activities, hobbies, work, like everything revolves around just being with this person, because it's this euphoric feeling, and the rest of your life just looks so drab. And I've been doing these things for decades, on my own.
Yeah.
I'm kind of tired of being on my own. Now now you have somebody. Why am I going, why would I want to go back to that? But keeping that balance is so important. Having your own identity, having your own independence when you're in a relationship is so important because, one reason is if it ends, you have something. You still have something. You still have a part of you. You still have a part of your life. The problem is when you give up your life and you put everything into a relationship, the relationship ends. When it's over, you're like a homeless person emotionally.
Yeah, basically. That's a brilliant way of putting it. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, that's the end of part 1. I will put the link to Mandy's article in the show notes and also to our Instagram accounts, which mine is at Joe Ryan and Mandy's is at Mandy Musings. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will come out with part 2 next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.